it's your birthday. You wake up, and for exactly 3 seconds, there's this small flicker of something, not excitement exactly, more like a question, a half-formed feeling that rises and dissolves before you can name it. You silence your alarm, you look at the ceiling, and then you just get up, make coffee, go to work. Maybe you don't even tell anyone what day it is. Your phone fills up with notifications, little digital confetti from people who haven't spoken to you in months. You read each one with a polite, detached warmth, like reading birthday cards through glass. You reply, you smile. It's fine. It's all fine. But somewhere underneath that calm, there's something you've never fully examined, because everyone assumes people like you are just mature, evolved, above the noise of balloons and cake and performative celebration. They say it like it's a compliment. Oh, you're so low-key about your birthday. I love that. But here's what almost nobody understands about this. What you're carrying isn't indifference. It's something far older and far more interesting than that. There's a story we tell about people who downplay their birthdays. We call them grounded, humble, unbothered. We treat it as a sign of emotional maturity, like they've outgrown the childish need for attention and grown into something more sophisticated. And maybe you've told yourself this story too, that you just don't need the fuss, that you've simply moved past it, that you're not one of those people who makes a big deal out of a day on a calendar. But psychology doesn't work that way. It doesn't let you just quietly opt out of something without leaving a trace. When a human being consistently minimizes the one day a year that's culturally designated as their one annual permission slip to be the center of warmth, that's not neutrality, that's a pattern, and patterns like this always have a route. They always have a story beneath the story. The truth is, how you relate to your own birthday is one of the most quietly revealing psychological windows into your attachment history. Your relationship with being seen, and the specific way you learned to protect yourself from disappointment. That's what nobody tells you. What we're talking about has a name, and once you hear it, you'll start seeing it everywhere in yourself, in the people you love, in the patterns that have quietly shaped your whole emotional life. It's called anticipated disappointment collapse. Anticipated disappointment collapse is what happens when the brain, after one too many experiences of unmet expectation, learns to neutralize joy before it arrives, not because joy isn't wanted, but because the gap between what was hoped for and what actually happened once, twice, enough times trained the nervous system to see hope itself as the danger, not the outcome, the hope. So the brain does what it always does when it detects a familiar threat. It collapses the anticipation early. It lowers the ceiling. It tells you this day doesn't matter before the day can prove it does or doesn't. And then it wraps that strategy in a story that sounds like wisdom. I'm just not really a birthday person. But you are. You were once, and something shifted. And that shift explains more about you than almost any single thing I could tell you. Here's where it gets complicated, because anticipated disappointment collapse doesn't start on a birthday, it starts much earlier, and much quieter than that. For most people who experience it, there's a specific category of memory, not one dramatic event, but a pattern of small, compounding moments. The birthday where the plans fell through, the celebration where the energy in the room felt obligatory rather than genuine. The year where you waited for something, a phone call, a gesture, a specific person to show up in a specific way, and they didn't. Not maliciously, just incompletely. And children, even teenagers, even adults in their 20s are extraordinarily sensitive to the emotional quality of being celebrated, not because they're selfish, but because at a biological level, being celebrated by your tribe is a signal that you matter, that your existence registers, that you are worth the disruption of an ordinary day. When that signal is inconsistent, warm some years, thin other years, absent in the ways that count, the brain doesn't conclude people are inconsistent. The brain concludes something far more personal. It concludes, maybe I'm not someone who inspires that kind of effort, and that belief, quiet as it is, becomes the operating system. society doesn't help. We live in a culture that labels emotional need as immature, that treats not caring as strength and wanting as weakness. So when the brain is already looking for a way to make the vulnerability of a birthday feel safer, culture hands it the perfect disguise. I'm above this. Birthdays are just a day. I don't need the performance. The disguise is so convincing that you start to believe it yourself. That's the real villain here. Not the people who didn't show up. Not even the disappointments themselves. It's the story that calcified around those disappointments and convinced you that needing to feel celebrated was somehow a flaw. It wasn't. It never was. Anticipated disappointment. Collapse works through 3 layers, and understanding each layer is how you stop being run by it. The first layer is the preemptive ceiling. This is where the brain quietly decides, weeks or days before your birthday, that nothing much is going to happen, and more importantly, that nothing much needs to happen. It's a subtle, almost unconscious lowering of internal stakes. You stop making wishes. You stop imagining scenarios. You tell people don't do anything and mean it because meaning it feels safer than not meaning it and being let down. The preemptive ceiling feels like perspective. It feels like you've just grown wiser than other people about what matters. But what it actually is a defense mechanism that's been promoted to a personality trait. The second layer is emotional flatness as protection. On the actual day, many people with this pattern describe feeling strangely disconnected. Not sad, not even uncomfortable, really. Just flat, watching the day pass from behind a thin sheet of glass. And they interpret this flatness as evidence that they were right. This day really doesn't mean anything to them. But emotional flatness isn't the absence of feeling. Research on affect regulation and specifically worked coming out of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and Studies, tracking adult birthday behavior across decades shows that people who report the most indifference around personally significant days actually show the highest cortisol variability on those days. The body is responding. The nervous system is active. The flatness on the surface is the result of a suppression mechanism working at full capacity underneath. In other words, you're not unmoved, you're containing the movement. And that takes energy. More energy than just letting yourself feel it. The third layer is the reinterpretation loop. This is perhaps the most important one, because it's the layer that makes everything permanent if left unchecked. After each birthday passes quietly and safely, no big expectations, no dramatic disappointment, the brain files it as evidence. See, you didn't need it, you're fine. This confirms it. The strategy gets validated. The ceiling gets built into the architecture of how you see yourself. And over years, over decades, the loop tightens until you don't even remember wanting anything different. Until the protection becomes indistinguishable from the self. Picture a woman named Priya. She's 34. Thoughtful, perceptive, the kind of person everyone goes to for advice but nobody thinks to check on. She works in urban planning, loves long walks, keeps journals she never reads. On paper, she is, by everyone's assessment, doing well. Every year, around the second week of September, something quiet shifts in her. She gets slightly more efficient, slightly more self-contained. She clears her schedule. She tells her friends casually, "Don't worry about my birthday, honestly. I'd rather just have a normal day." And her friends, who love her, comply, because she seems so certain, because she says it in that calm, grounded way that makes you believe her. Her birthday comes, she goes to work. Someone in the office brings a small cupcake with a candle. She smiles genuinely and feels a flash of something she immediately categorizes as embarrassment. She eats the cupcake at her desk. She answers emails. She goes home. That night, alone, she notices a feeling she can't quite name. Not sadness, not longing, something more like hunger. Like she's been on a specific diet for so long that she can no longer remember what it felt like to not be hungry. She doesn't cry. She watches something forgettable, goes to sleep, and wakes up the next day, already fully recalibrated. What Priya didn't know, what she couldn't know from inside the pattern was that the certainty she felt when she said don't worry about. It was not the certainty of someone who didn't want. It was the certainty of someone who had learned that wanting was the most dangerous thing she could do. On this particular day, that's anticipated disappointment collapsed in full motion. Not dramatic, not obviously painful, just quietly, efficiently, protecting her from something that hasn't happened yet, and in doing so, ensuring it never will. So let's come back to where we started. That Tuesday morning, the ceiling, the coffee, the decision, conscious or not, to make it just another day. Here's what you now understand that you didn't when you clicked play. That quietness around your birthday is not evidence of your maturity, it's evidence of your intelligence, a specifically emotional intelligence that learned, over time, to see the gap between wanting and receiving as a threat, and to close that gap before it could hurt you. That's not small, that's actually an extraordinarily complex adaptation, but adaptations can outlive their usefulness, and the thing about anticipated disappointment collapse is that it was never just about birthdays. It bleeds into the way you ask for things or don't, the way you set expectations in relationships or don't, the way you let yourself look forward to something or don't. It's a template, and templates run quietly in the background of every significant moment in your life. The path forward isn't to suddenly throw yourself a lavish, party and force feeling into a space where it doesn't fit. It's smaller and more honest than that. It starts with noticing the ceiling, catching yourself lowering the stakes before anything's even happened, and asking quietly, without judgment, is this what I actually want? Or is this what I've learned to want because it's safer? That question alone changes something. Not everything, but something. Because here's the real truth underneath all of it. You still want to feel like your existence registers. You still want the people you love to show up in the ways that count. Not the performance of it, not balloons and noise, but the warmth, the specificity, the feeling of someone going even slightly out of their way because you exist in their world and that matters to them. That wanting is not weakness, it is the most human thing about you. And you were never broken for feeling it. You were just protecting something tender, and now you know its name. The goal was never to stop wanting to be celebrated. It was to stop being afraid that you weren't worth it. Tell me in the comments, is this something you recognized in yourself or someone you love? And if you've been living behind that preemptive ceiling, when do you think it first went up? I read every comment on this channel, and the conversation underneath these videos is always where the most honest stuff happens. If this is the kind of content that makes you look at yourself differently, subscribe. We go deeper every week on Mind Beneath.